Aoba was just an ordinary high school student living a quiet life, when a mysterious, low-budget megazord appears, threatening his life. Aoba is saved by a mysterious female classmate, Hina, who takes him on an adventure to the future, where he battles other rickety machines in an effort to win back his love. While an airship battle happened in the sky, a low-budget black hole opened amidst them, its yellow color a testament to its cheap design, but still powerful enough to cause a disruption in the ongoing battle, forcing all operatives to evacuate. A certain pilot, on the other hand, was incompetent and couldn't properly escape, causing the hole to suck him into his demise. In a room somewhere else, a high school boy named Aoba tried to ignore his alarm, desperate for more sleep, but his little sister barged in, dragging him out of bed for school. When he got to the dining room, he rushed through his meal, with his mother criticizing him for playing games till midnight at the expense of the first day of a new session. After finishing his meal, he wished his late father goodbye and rushed over to the train station, blaming himself for his lack of priorities. Upon getting to the station, Aoba met up with a classmate who was also heading towards school. Meanwhile, at a suspicious warehouse, a mysterious girl talked to some spread-out sheets, telling them she would be back later. Later that morning at school, Aoba and his pal arrived, greeting another friend who told them they would be using a new sitting position. Aoba was now next to the class mystery girl, Hina, who seemed to always be awkward around him. After greeting each other, the pair prepared for a tasking school session. While class went on, Aoba couldn't help but look at Hina, wondering why she was jumpy as a fish on land whenever he was around her. When she noticed his gaze, she flinched, causing her to almost drop her eraser, which was saved by Aoba. After receiving it back, the jumpiness continued, causing her to fall as well, until Aoba caught her like a useful Disney prince. When he tried to start up a conversation using his lucky set of events, the teacher stopped them, telling them he noticed their unnecessary love play at the back of the class. Later that day, Aoba and his friends went out to a mini court in their school to play basketball. The taller friend couldn't put his height to use as he was prevented from scoring by Aoba, who made it seem like he was the taller one. After the loss, the second guy tried to win against Aoba by talking about his situationship, but Aoba would have none of it as he dribbled past and scored his goal. At a bench beside the court, Hina looked through her devices, worried about some readings. When she looked at Aoba like a fool lost in love, the taller friend appeared behind her back, teasing her on the topic of her unrequited affection. She tried to ignore him, but he kept on yapping, eventually getting her interest when he offered to link them up. However, their conversation was cut short as one of her gadgets began to beep, informing her of an incoming threat. Above a nearby sea, the low-budget black hole appeared, releasing the useless soldier it once hosted. Along with his Walmart megazord, the pilot crashed into the water and assessed his mecha, wondering why he was now in 2014. When he realized he was at a timeline where he could access a weaker Aoba, he prepared to get rid of the boy who supposedly put him through the worst moments of his life. While Aoba and his friends continued their game, they received a disaster alert, but had no idea what disaster it was. And before they could react, Hina appeared, calling Aoba and his friend to follow her. It was too late as the mecha dropped down like thunder, ready to get rid of its target. It stood like a lifeless hunk of junk for a few seconds, gaining the attention of the students. After seeing Aoba, the pilot aimed his cannon at the high schooler, ready to be done with him. When he fired the first shot, Aoba dodged, saving his friends along with him, while the other students ran away. After realizing his shot was whack, the pilot scanned for the boys and saw them running away, forcing a chase. When his friends got caught at an exit the mecha appeared from, Aoba realized the mecha was after him. The mecha continued to fire shots and miss as the pilot's aim was hopeless, missing his target by miles. The mecha ran out of ammo, allowing Aoba to get a bike he could use to escape. Even though the pilot was now using a sword, his aim was still garbage, giving Aoba room to ride away on a bicycle. At another part of the school, Hina grabbed a power bike and drove off, hoping she could catch up to Aoba. The machine continued chasing after Aoba, destroying parts of the road and frightening innocent citizens, till eventually, one of his garbage attacks blasted Aoba and the bike from its impact. But it was still not enough, as Aoba regained himself and continued escaping the useless pilot. When Aoba was about running out of luck, another machine appeared, blasting back the trashy pilot along with his mecha. The hatch opened, and Hina, who was in the cockpit, offered Aoba a hand, telling him to get in. After seeing Aoba get into the mecha, the pilot scanned his opponent, and discovered it was Hina, causing him to go into a deep rage. He charged towards Hina, shouting with all his might, but it was of no help as he was a trashy pilot. After a series of dodging and attacking, he finally got a meaningful attack in, destroying one of the opposing machine's arms. But his lack of skill remained evident, as he fell into the path of her cannon, allowing Hina to blast away the incompetent pilot. With the opponent down, Hina regained her breath, but after seeing Aoba so close to her, she felt edgy again, eventually struggling to compose herself. When Aoba asked her what happened, she explained she was a time traveler from the future. She tasked herself with the role of watching over him, knowing that the incompetent pilot would one day appear, aiming to eliminate him. She told him his future self had warned her about the attack, but before she could continue her explanations, the military appeared to investigate the commotion from the mysterious machines. She told him her role was done and he had to leave and forget everything she had talked about, but Aoba was against it, telling her he knew she had nowhere to run. Just then, the incompetent pilot rose again, grabbing onto her mecha while setting his to self-destruct. When she tried to escape his clutches, she realized he had hacked into the system, ridding her of the mecha's arm strength. And in a last-ditch effort to survive, she flew up with both mechas. She was worried that her machine lacked maintenance. After seeing the Walmart black hole in the sky, she told the incompetent pilot it was due time for him to be gone. She disconnected the communication and told Aoba to trust her, explaining that there was a reason he was in the future with her. After getting him on board with her plan, she charged towards the hole, pushing her rickety machine to the limits. They charged into the hole with the incompetent pilot as his machine blew up once they got in. Suddenly, Hina's machine began to break down as well, causing Aoba to panic. Hina assured him he would be fine, telling him a mysterious Dio was waiting, as she disappeared into an eerie purple light. When Aoba regained consciousness, he was in another mecha with voices coming through the radio. When the mecha got up, Aoba saw himself in a warehouse where an intense battle was taking place, with other mechas and fighter jets aiming to destroy each other. In a command base somewhere else, an analyst told the commander that their fallen mecha had risen again with a new pilot. When another analyst objected, claiming the pilot was dead, the first showed her the numbers, surprising the room. The new pilot was matching with another pilot, Dio, on the battlefield. Aoba continued to panic as he had been transported to a mecha in a new world he had no idea of. Some hours before, a secret government hangar was attacked by another group of mechas. The pilot of a particular Valiancer, the name for all machines of this form, was killed by the impact from one of the first waves, leaving Dio, his coupling partner, and the entire command base in a pickle. After getting the order to fly out and attack whilst ensuring none of their Valiancers were stolen, the remaining pilots flew out to defend their hangar, while the ground men continued their evacuation. The attacking Valiancers, headed by Bison, mocked the security of the hangar as they successfully destroyed the opposing forces. Bison warned his teammate Varjim to be careful, as their goal wasn't to kill the opposition but to claim some of their Valiancers. They split themselves up into teams, with Bison and Tarjim going for the airship, while the others faced off against the defense from the hangar. While Dio defended against an attack from Lasha, one of the attackers, he noticed a new reading from his Valiancer, signifying there was a pilot in the abandoned mecha below them. The lieutenant at the command center placed a call to the mecha, asking whoever was inside to respond with their purpose. But Aoba, who was transported to their battle-ridden hangar, was oblivious to her questions, thinking he was speaking to Hina. When he realized it wasn't Hina, he introduced himself to the lieutenant, who didn't believe his weird time-traveling story. She ordered him to get out of the Valiancer, but he couldn't as he didn't know how. When the commanders saw the situation in the battle with their fighting Valiancers getting overwhelmed, he asked the analyst to repeat her report on Luxon, the Valiancer Aoba had been transported to. After hearing the analyst announce it was a perfect match for Dio's Bradyan, the commander ordered they pair both machines together, as they were in a tight spot with psychopathic Valiancers, leaving them with little choice. Although the lieutenant and analyst tried to argue against his decision, he told them he'd take responsibility if anything went wrong and assured them they wouldn't lose. They issued the command to Dio, who contacted Aoba to inform him of the pairing while simultaneously dodging attacks from the attacking Valiancers. The attacking Valiancers continued trying to take down the airship until eventually one of the pilots noticed Aoba's Valiancer in the warehouse below. Realizing they would attack the defenseless Valiancer and the clueless pilot, Dio shouted at Aoba to chant "Connect with Dio," but Aoba, who was still thinking of Hina, remembered her last words, Dio waiting for him. Rather than chant, he continued to pester Dio with questions. Dio, irritated by the stupidity of his new partner, continuously tried to convince him to do the chant. When the opposing Valiancer from Mikhailov fired multiple rockets at Luxon, Aoba finally realized his mistake and made the chant, allowing him to connect as his mecha boosted up like a megazord. After successfully coupling, they boosted up with the regular cringe transformation sequence, allowing them to grow new wings, and Aoba gained piloting ability, which he used to blast away Mikhailov. With his mecha now boosted, Dio charged towards his former attackers, the hunters now becoming the hunted as he blitzed past them, dodging all their mid-attacks. Aoba, on the other hand, received information from the command base that he would now defend the Valiancer, as he possessed the piloting knowledge of Dio, which allowed him to compete with Mikhailov. Dio continued fending off his two opponents, pressuring the two once oppressive pilots into defense while he attacked. The command center observed that his performance had doubled, and was amazed that Aoba, who could barely move a finger previously, was now properly fighting with another Valiancer like a prodigy. Mikhailov finally pushed through Aoba, eventually pushing him back, which almost affected Dio, but after rallying himself, Aoba kicked back the mecha and launched his own attack. He flew back with Luxon, baiting Mikhailov, and when the attacker tried to slice him from the top, he simulated an escape and applied it, allowing him to slice through Mikhailov and his mecha like butter, granting him victory at the expense of the opposition. After seeing their comrade eliminated, Tarjim went berserk and aimed to destroy Aoba, but Bizon was against it, telling his team to retreat as they had gotten valuable information. Upon hearing the command, the attackers left the hangar, knowing they had learned something new about their opponent and taken down the airship. With the attackers now in retreat, the commander rested easy, telling the lieutenant they had to leave the hangar immediately with Luxon's new pilot, while the analysts left the command room to get to the mecha. Dio deactivated the coupling, causing their mechas to fall, and after landing their machines, the base surrounded Aoba, hoping he'd come out of the machine peacefully. The boy, on the other hand, had no idea how to get off the machine, so he searched through it, hoping his clumsiness would provide a solution. After picking up a hair clip, the hatch opened, but he was immediately faced with a pilot aiming a gun at his head. At the command center, the commander reported all the events to his superior, telling him about the new pilot as well. And after getting orders to return to the main base, the call ended. Meanwhile, at the lieutenant's office, Aoba was being interrogated, with his property and himself getting scanned by the analysts. They explained that Japan had now joined a Confederate Treaty of Liberty alliance, which their current base belonged to. They battled against the Zoglia Empire, which was where the attackers from before hailed from. Dio continued pointing his gun at Aoba, telling him the story about time traveling was nonsense, which caused an argument. However, the commander called for Dio and some other officers, ending their discourse and leaving Aoba hanging. While he attempted to leave, Aoba took the hairpin and screamed at Dio, describing Hina. But it had no effect, as Dio didn't know who Hina was. At the Zoglia ship, they grieved Mikhailov's untimely death but promised to put his sacrifice to good use, as a Secret Service officer came in, requesting a sample from one of the new Valiancers they uncovered. Back at the base, the analyst explained to the commander that Aoba's possessions did match items from years before, but she was uncertain about the truth in his words. They decided to let him move freely in the ship, even though his story was garbage, as they had put a tracker on him and he was too weak to escape. In his new room, Aoba was handed over his property by the second analyst, Ensign Nasu. After handing him a chocolate bar to cheer him up, Lee, the pilot lieutenant, and Nasu, the analyst, left the room, telling him how he could exit, hoping he didn't trap himself like he did in Luxon. He looked at the hair clip, wondering why Hina assumed the bum named Dio was waiting for him, considering Dio was a jackass. Back at the command base, they prepared to launch away from the hidden hangar, while the Zoglian forces prepared to attack their ship. The trained pilots from the Liberty Alliance waited in their Valiancers until they were needed, as their ship launched into the sky. In a surprising turn of events, the Zoglian forces steeled their resolve, with their new pilot, Hina, ready to capture a Valiancer from their enemies. In the later part of the 21st century, a mineral named nectaribium was discovered, causing the Zoglian Empire to launch an operation aimed at conquering the world. When they grew too powerful, a group of other nations joined together to form the Liberty Alliance, a confederation that aimed to take down the Zoglian forces as the world's final hope. However, they were inferior in ability and power, forcing them to develop a new system for valiancers called coupling. It led to a series of injuries and problems for the test subjects, but eventually, the alliance relied on compatibility between warriors. As Nasu continued her explanation on the future, she realized her excessive yap was too boring for Aoba, making him fall asleep. She was infuriated that she wasted so much time trying to explain to a blockhead, so she screamed at him until he woke up. At the command office, the commander gave instructions to the maintenance workers in the hangar of the ship, telling them details about Aoba. After ending the call, he told his lieutenant they would need to be ready ahead of any possible attacks from the Empire and its forces. Meanwhile, Aoba followed Nasu around, explaining to her that he was sleepy due to the previous battle, and not that her lecture was that boring. She told him she was simply teaching him the basics, and he could have concentrated better as she was a very busy person. When he asked if she was a specialist, she denied it, telling him she was simply in charge of the coupling system as an assistant of Elvira. He apologized to her for sleeping, telling her he was in 2 consecutive robot battles. He told her about Hina and asked her what she thought about his situation, but Nasu didn't believe him, calling his story a fun dream. Disappointed she didn't believe him, Aoba followed the analyst into the hangar, beholding his special valiancer named Luxon. He noticed some differences and asked Nasu if it was different, but it wasn't, as the commander simply requested they make some modifications that would fit him. He asked if he was going to fight again, but the analyst was equally confused, telling him they were the orders of the captain, and she assumed he would. While he pondered on it, Dio appeared, telling the pair that Aoba wasn't supposed to be in the hangar as a civilian, but Aoba ignored his yapping, changing the topic by teasing him for not bringing a gun while Dio questioned him again. Noticing Aoba would only continue to ignore him, Dio turned his focus to Nasu, asking her why she brought trash into the hangar. She explained Elvira requested she take him on a tour, hence why he was in the hangar. Aoba butted in, yelling that it was his right to see the hangar as well. When Dio responded, telling Aoba he didn't care about the opinion of a low-ranking civilian, an alarm rang, informing them of an incoming enemy attack. Upon hearing the sounds, the officers abandoned Aoba, with Nasu telling the lad to find his way to his room as she was now incredibly busy. The command center prepared themselves for an escape as Nasu appeared, taking over a seat from Elvira. After getting the room in order and gathering all the information from the officers, the commander issued an order to the valiancers except Aoba, informing them they needed to stall the enemy for 3 minutes so the ship could safely get away. After all the machines flew off, the head of maintenance sent his crew to other parts of the ship, asking them to brace for a blast. He looked at the clueless Aoba, who stood beside him, gazing at the magnificent machines. The Zoglian forces engaged the defending valiancers, while the Alliance ship readied its shields and charged its engine to allow a smooth escape. When the ship was fully charged, the commander asked the valiancers to return on board, while the attacking forces withdrew, leaving the Alliance with a chance to escape. However, when they aimed to blast off, a surprise attack came out of nowhere, blasting the ship and damaging its shields. The ship and its crew were shaken, as the Zoglian forces had given them false hope before firing a nectar cannon through their lowered defense. When the vice commander asked how they got such a powerful weapon to the middle of the ocean, they noticed the Zoglian forces were not gone, but instead back with a new weapon and a renowned enemy pilot named Alfred. The nectar cannon fired again, this time taking out the ship's left engine, but luckily for the Alliance, the cannon needed to recharge after every 2 shots. While the mecha regained itself, the commander ordered the valiancers to launch an attack on the resting machine. However, their plan was interrupted as the other Zoglian valiancers returned, blocking the path of the opposers. The battle raged on, with the Alliance valiancers struggling to keep up with the Zoglian forces, except Dio, who was obviously being lured into a trap by Alfred. Meanwhile, on the ship, Don, the head of maintenance, sent his men to the left engine, hoping they could reduce the amount of damage done to it. When Aoba asked how they planned on surviving, the old man teased, telling him he'd be fine as long as he knew how to swim. Suddenly, the commander appeared on a mini-screen beside them, whispering that he would be requiring both their services. On the battlefield, Dio continued chasing after Alfred, wasting bullets as he couldn't hit with his mid-aim. When he thought he had gotten the Valiancer just where he wanted him, he was ambushed by two other Valiancers, including the mysterious rider Hina, who was acknowledged as a prodigy by Alfred. They hunted the hunter, with Hina pressuring Dio in close-quarter combat, forcing him to retreat. They continued overwhelming the Valiancer with numbers, but luckily for Dio, Luxon and Aoba were ready to deploy. The commander apologized to Aoba for getting him mixed up in the battle and explained that he still possessed his knowledge of the mecha from the previous coupling. He received the instructions and, although scared to enter the battle, eventually charged out to get Dio out of his pickle. When Dio realized he simply needed to get in range of the coupling, he ignored his battle by flying toward Aoba, forcing Hina to chase after him. After getting in range, they initiated the coupling and boosted their machines, ready to flip the tables on the Zoglians. Now, with renewed vigor, Dio left Aoba to deal with Hina while he chased after Alfred. He charged toward the mecha with the Nectar cannon, ready to destroy it. But Alfred wouldn't sit back and watch, firing a shot after gloating that Dio's speed didn't matter. However, he would eat his words as both his shots were dodged, while Dio's machine continued pressuring him. Another Valiancer came in to support Alfred, while Aoba continued his battle with Hina. In the command room, the analyst explained that their coupling created a mental link, boosting their mecha performance along with mental fortitude. Dio successfully defeated one of the Valiancer soldiers, while Aoba continued to duke it out with Hina, putting her on the defensive as his machine was superior. After getting her where he wanted, Aoba overwhelmed her with his speed and dodged her attack before landing one of his own, which blasted her back. When the cockpit he destroyed opened, he realized the opposing pilot was none other than the girl he had desperately sought since he got to the future, Hina. Upon seeing her, he began to freak out, causing a disruption in the system and forcing a decoupling, which not only affected him, but Dio as well. He opened his cockpit and reached out to her, shouting her name as he tried to wake her from her unconsciousness. When she woke up, she saw him screaming her name, even though she had no idea who the psychopath was. Dio recovered from his shock, surprised at the stupid actions of Aoba. When he tried to grab her, Bison charged toward him with his own Valiancer, forcing Lee to intercept the attack and block Bison. Even though he could clearly see how absurd his actions were, Aoba still needed Lee to remind him that she was an enemy, and if he wished to claim her, he needed to do it safely. Just then, she fired a shot at him, causing him to fall into the mecha and force a close mode, which gave Bison the opportunity to grab Hina and escape. While Aoba remained the useless, defenseless fool on the battlefield, Alfred fired another shot, forcing Lee to intercept once again, but this time at the expense of the mecha. With the enemy now retreating due to their loss, the commander ordered the Alliance Valiancers to return to the ship. After getting back to the ship, Dio punched the wounded Aoba, blaming him for sympathizing with the enemy at the expense of Lieutenant Lee's life. Aoba looked over to his senior pilot and saw him being put on a stretcher due to the severity of his injuries, while Dio continued to shout at him. When Aoba tried to deny Hina being the enemy, Dio reminded him that she shot at him, calling him a love-blind fool. Eventually, their argument had to be ended by Jarl, a fellow pilot, and Dawn, who reminded Dio that Aoba was still just a civilian with no obligation to military rules. After that, Dawn lifted up Aoba as Elvira rushed into the hangar to meet her beloved Lee, who had been hurt in battle. Dawn asked Aoba to go over to them and apologize to Lee, as his uselessness was the cause of Lee's injuries. The rookie walked over to Lee, apologizing for his incompetence, but Lee told him not to worry, saying he was their savior, and they would be dead regardless if he hadn't stepped up to the battlefield. Elvira and the medical team took Lee away, leaving Aoba to think about how stupid his actions were. In the command room, the vice commander ordered the ship pilot to head over to the Narashino base so they could repair the damage sustained during the battle. Meanwhile, in the Zoglian submarine, Alfred argued with the Secret Service agent Margaret, as she had ordered Hina to be detained due to the enemy calling her out as an ally. She told him there was nothing more to discuss, saying that even though the enemies knew his name, Hina's crime was falling under her suspicion. After she left, Bison approached Alfred, claiming Hina's innocence, and the lieutenant colonel assured him he would do everything in his power to secure her freedom. When the Alliance ship reached Narashino, Aoba was allowed to go around town since he claimed it was his hometown. Although the vice commander was against his outing, the commander reassured her it would be fine as he sent an operative to watch over him. As Aoba walked around the city, he called out to Nasu, who had been following him like an underpaid spy. He told her there was no need to worry about an escape, so she offered to take him around town if he didn't know the way. He stated that it was his hometown, so he had an idea, but he was unsure if it would be the same as 70 years before. Still not believing his story, she played along, telling him there was a change in landscape, so she would still need to follow him. They went to the address Aoba had mentioned and realized that part of the town had been leveled by the military to make room for a new base, meaning his house was most likely gone. When he asked for information on his sister, the database brought nothing up, reminding him that even if she were still alive, she would be 88 by now. They left the area and took rides around town, eventually arriving at what used to be his former high school. He climbed up to fly over the fence into the building, but before he dropped down, noticed that Nasu's lack of exercise had already caught up to her, making her incapable of climbing up as well. After offering her a hand and getting her up, they sat on the fence looking at the semi-wrecked school Aoba claimed to have once attended. They dropped in and walked around, eventually stopping at the basketball court Aoba once used to frequent. He picked up a deflated ball on the ground, smiling as he remembered the fun times he once had. Nasu asked him about basketball, and he explained to her that he wasn't as lazy as analysts like her. Back in school, he had been a basketball player. He shot a hoop, recalling his last moments with his friends and Hina, who had gone from gazing with him in a mecha to shooting at him, making her seem like a different person. He told Nasu that his home and school were gone, so he had no idea what to do next. He explained the situation with the low-budget black hole, telling her how it had transported him into the mecha. After leaving the school, they walked back towards the ship, with Aoba keeping Hina on his mind. As they walked, Aoba asked Nasu about Zoglia, wondering if it was possible for him to head over there. Nasu refused, telling him it was a suicidal mission and that he would die before reaching it. When they got to the seashore, Aoba asked if it was okay for him to stop piloting a Valiancer. He admitted that he had no other place to go except the ship, but he was worried that he would only continue being a burden to the crew. However, Nasu didn't accept his statement, claiming she believed him to be their savior due to his perfect levels as a pilot, even though he was a newbie. He remembered the commander, Don, and Lee appreciating him for being their helper and asking him to continue helping them. So he steeled his will and promised to do his best as a pilot and new member of the Alliance ship, Cygnus. Upon returning to the ship, he told the commander that he would join Cygnus because he had nowhere else to go, and it would help him meet Hina. When the commander asked what he would do if attacked by Hina, Aoba explained that he wasn't sure as he would never attack her. The commander had no issue with this and thanked him for joining. The commander asked for Elvira's opinion as an analyst, and she agreed, saying it was for the best since he was the best match for Dio. Later that day, Aoba was assigned the role of an ensign, and he visited Lee in the sickbay, apologizing for his uselessness and promising to be a better teammate. Lee assured him that he was fine, but said he should ensure it never happened again, as they were only lucky to be alive. Elvira butted in, reminding him that the forced decoupling was also a threat, as it could cause brain damage. When Aoba asked if she was concerned about him, Elvira told him it was her duty, and she was tired of the dumb pilots thinking analysts were only concerned with data. Lee laughed, teasing Aoba for not understanding women's emotions, so Elvira hit him on a wound, claiming he was just as hopeless in that department. Back in the command room, the commander poured himself a glass, pleased that he didn't need to use the services of his vice. They had planned to go John Wick on Aoba if he had chosen not to come back, as he knew many of their important secrets. The vice commander closed her gun case and informed her superior that they would be heading to Chitose to repair their damaged left engine. The next morning, while they were departing, the commander was informed that a private ship was under attack, and they would need to take a detour to save it from the Zoglian Empire. The pilots were dispatched into their Valiancers, with Dio and Aoba asked not to couple until they were given the go-ahead due to the limits of the process. A Zoglian ship had found prey in a special private ship, and the captain of the Zoglian force expected a promotion if his attack was successful. However, before they could claim the ship, they came under attack from other Valiancers attempting to halt their operation. Aoba and Dio were given the green light to couple, but when they initiated the process, it surprisingly failed. They were unable to link, as both parties were at odds like fire and ice, so they decided to engage the enemy without their special power-up. The Valiancers fought their enemies, dodging bullets and blocking attacks in a tough battle. The Zoglian ship continued its operation, connecting cables to the private ship, and the Alliance was unable to stop it, as the Cygnus was out of range, making it too risky to try a shot. Seeing that the Cygnus was struggling, Dio charged towards the ship, ignoring warnings from the analysts so he could manually disconnect the cables. Upon seeing the symbol on the ship, Dio realized it was his family's ship, which made him panic even more. The commander explained that it wasn't just a problem for Dio, but a problem for the Alliance as a whole, given Dio's family was a big deal, and could be used as a political tool by Zoglia. After hearing the severity of the issue, Aoba chose to put Dio's stupidity aside and convinced him to try coupling once more. They initiated the process and successfully completed the transformation, giving them the boosts and advantage against the enemy. They successfully disconnected the cables and destroyed the enemy Valiancers, giving Cygnus a chance to destroy the Zoglian ship. After completing the mission, the couplers were tasked with guiding the private ship to Cheeto's base. While they flew, Aoba noticed a little girl in a wheelchair sitting by a window, looking back at him. Once they landed, Dio left his Valiancer and ran towards his family ship. He told the guards to stand down, reminding them that he was a Weinberg, before reuniting with his sister, Fiona, who was equally glad to see him. When Aoba approached, their reunion was dulled, not by his presence, but by Dio's father, Weinberg, appearing and asking his son to make himself useful somewhere else. In the Zoglian submarine fleet, the Secret Service agent Margaret and the Lieutenant Colonel Alfred gathered their soldiers and prepared them for a briefing on their next mission. Back at the Cheeto's base, the maintenance officers serviced the Valiancers after their battles. Heading into the Cheeto's base, Aoba looked onto Dio, remembering the complicated daddy issues his buddy suffered from. While he pondered, another ensign, along with Nasu, approached him, telling him that as a new addition to Cygnus, he needed to undergo a special rookie training due to the ship's customs. Meanwhile, the lieutenant handed over a stack of documents to the commander, causing him to grumble. He asked whether he could just sign the documents without going through them, but the lieutenant refused, telling him she wouldn't allow him to be useless. When he asked about the special officers, Aoba and Dio, he was informed that one was undergoing physical training while the other was being engaged by other ensigns to perform their cringe rituals for newbies. The ensigns took him to the roof of the Cygnus and told him about the procedures, but after hearing how cringe it was, Aoba refused to do it, forcing Nasu to drag him back. After hearing Nasu plead and make excuses, Aoba finally agreed. Although still skeptical due to the weird statements from the other ensign, he was asked to pick up different cleaning equipment, transitioning from washing the roof to cleaning toilets and peeling potatoes. When the ensign ordered him to use a pest bottle to ensure Lee was not pressed, both the lieutenant and the rookie refused due to the insanity, while Nasu blushed, feeding her fantasies. At the Zoglian submarine, Hina thanked Alfred for pleading on her behalf and getting her freed from detention. When Alfred asked why she still looked gloomy, Hina responded, telling him the agents were still suspicious of her, so Alfred assured her she would be clear once she captured Aoba and his Valiancer. After getting out of the office, Hina met Bison, who asked her how she was. She told him she understood the agent's suspicion, so she wanted to prepare ahead of their next mission. Back at the Cygnus, Aoba freaked out as the other ensigns left him with the task of cleaning the entire airship stairway. Tired of the unnecessary work, Aoba threw down his broomstick, not wanting to play along anymore. He sat at the stairway, looking down, before noticing Dio's sister Fiona getting blocked by the security, making her unable to get into the ship. After she left, Aoba approached her, introducing himself to her. He asked her if she wanted to speak with Dio, but she refused, telling him Dio would be against it, as he felt indebted to her. His hometown was attacked by Zoglian forces while he defended, but when they were outnumbered, the commanding officer at the time ordered them to retreat. He tried to get back to his family to save his sister and mum, but he was held back by a fellow soldier, leaving his family at the mercy of a bomb barrage, eliminating his mum and leaving his sister in her condition. Although she didn't blame him, Dio felt indebted to his family due to his incompetence and inability to do anything meaningful back then. Feeling sorry for Dio's issues, Aoba thought up a plan to get Fiona into the base. He faked an issue, distracting the guards, while Fiona and her escort got in. After ensuring they were past security, he joined them to get Fiona over to Dio. When he branched into a special room, hoping to find Dio, he found something else in the form of a surprise party welcoming him to the Cygnus. He introduced Fiona and her guardian to the team, asking them who the surprise was for. They explained that it was tradition to host a welcome party for new members of their team, so they baited him out with the useless chores and prepared the party behind his back. The ensign apologized for his cringe behavior earlier, claiming he was forced to, but it was objected to, as his friends asserted he was always eager to do it. Don put a party hat on Aoba's head, congratulating him, causing Fiona to laugh in joy that her brother had such magnificent friends. After hearing Dio refuse to appear because it was his welcome party, Aoba placed a call to Dio in the training room, telling him he brought his sister on board, to Dio's surprise. When Dio decided to consider the offer, they received an emergency alert, informing them that they needed to get into action soon. In the airfield just outside Chitose, the Zoglian forces launched an attack on an Alliance fleet. The head of the Alliance military noticed the Zoglian forces were superior, so they decided to call for reinforcements from Chitose. The commander received the orders and instructed his vice to get the Valiancers ready. After gearing up, the pilots entered their weapons, ready to engage in another life-threatening battle. Dio received a transmission from the command center from his sister, who wasn't supposed to be there. When he tried convincing her to get away, she informed him that she would leave, but he needed to know she didn't blame him, and he had no reason to feel indebted after leaving them in that battle. In an unpredictable turn of events, the Chitose base was also being attacked by the Zoglians, who aimed to claim it along with the special mecha. The commander ordered the Cygnus to take flight and instructed his officers to tell headquarters they would be defending Chitose rather than joining the fight at sea. The Cygnus Valiancers flew out, with Aoba taking the lead and charging forward before getting attacked by Hina, who aimed to clear her name by defeating him. When Bison tried to call her back, Margaret told him to let her be, as it was necessary for her to clear her name. Hina continued engaging Aoba, who held back due to his unrequited lovesickness. She told him she had no knowledge of his ugly face and struck him down, claiming she would get rid of him once and for all. The other soldiers continued to fight with all they had. However, the Zoglian forces were not taking it lightly, bringing in more ships and a new submarine weapon to take down the Cygnus. Their submarine airship launched with its new Nectar cannon, which it used to blast back at the Cygnus, shaking the soldiers inside. The soldiers were now caught between a rock and a hard place, with a Nectar cannon to their front and an entire fleet at their back. The commander made a tough decision and asked the soldiers to abandon the Chitose base, prioritizing their escape with a new tactic from the coupling machines. Elvira thought it through and deemed Dio and Aoba capable of pulling it off, sending new instructions to the soldiers. Aoba continued engaging Hina, simply dodging her attacks and not attacking. When she wanted to make him pay for his excesses, she charged her blade at him, getting blocked by Dio, who didn't care about her well-being. He pushed her back and shot multiple attacks, forcing her to retreat, and the dumb knight Aoba came to her defense. He warned the fool that it was a battleground and he would die at that rate if he kept on being a sucker. While they argued, Elvira interrupted, telling them about the new strategy and plan to escape, introducing them to a special type of coupling that would aid their escape. When Hina tried an attack from behind, it was too late, as they had already coupled and begun their escape strategy. She tried to chase after them but eventually stopped as they were too fast, causing her to give up. The couple positioned themselves in front of the Cygnus, initiating the process for their escape. On Elvira's go, they fused to form a green Walmart megazord, which formed a shield in front of them, giving them a chance as they charged towards the Zoglian ship. When the Imperial forces fired their attacks, they were all blocked and deflected, making them useless. When the coupling effect wore down, the Cygnus shot an attack of its own, destroying some sides of the Imperial airship and giving the Alliance an escape route, causing Margaret to break down. Getting herself back up, Margaret ordered the soldiers to give chase, but Alfred spoke against it, telling her it would only lead to losses, as they had already claimed Chitose, which was their goal. On the Weinberg ship, Fiona, who was safe and sound, told her mogging father that they were only safe due to Dio's help, and the previous incident they suffered could be forgotten. But the old man didn't react, looking out into the sky, continuing his mog streak. Now safe from the Zoglian Empire, the Cygnus crew celebrated their escape, with Dio thanking Aoba for taking care of his sister. After seeing the coupling Valiancers in action, the Justice Alliance Assembly became furious, questioning the military for preparing weapons of that nature behind their backs. The head of the military, on the other hand, was pleased with the result and considered the opinion of the Assembly insignificant, as they only needed the people to accept their endeavors. They decided to set up a plan that would buy the interest of the citizens, forcing the assembly to accept their machines. On Cygnus, the vice commander spat out her coffee in surprise as the commander informed her that she would be required to wear a swimsuit as a promotion for the coupling Valiancers Luxon and Bradian. He informed her that they would be doing a video, as the directors sent from his superiors had already arrived on his carrier jet. In the hangar, Jarl explained to Aoba that the video was simply meant to increase their budget and hopefully increase the number of soldier volunteers. He told Aoba that he needed to be prim and proper, as he would be starred in the video. However, when the ugly director appeared, he complimented Dio for his looks and thanked Aoba for giving up Luxon for the video. Introducing From, the substitute coupler, who would star in the video since they needed soldiers who actually looked good. The new coupling Wrecker came in, thanking Aoba for his sacrifice, as he would take proper care of Luxon. Some minutes later, From was given a uniform and the crew were given their limitations on the ship. When From attempted to buy himself a spot on the good side of the vice commander, she rudely ignored his remarks, surprising the entire room. She gave out all 3 instructions and the director agreed to them, promising to follow them at all times. In the command room, Anessa, one of the working soldiers, told Nasu that their ship was being graced by a new good-looking pilot. She prettied herself up and told Nasu to come along with her, as they went to take a look at the new recruit. When he came out from the private room, Anessa gazed at the new pilot, jumping at him when the director requested help from one of the crew. She offered her services and introduced herself to From, who used his usual complimenting tactics to sway her heart. They agreed to use her as a facilitator and began their promotional video on the Cygnus and its coupling Valiancers. While Dio took a drink, Aoba joined him, asking about his relationship with From. He explained From was his previous classmate, who trained with him at pilot school and was among the best students. When Aoba asked why he seemed colder to From, Dio responded, claiming he saw optimistic frauds like From as useless burdens, just like nosy fools named Aoba. With the Cygnus continuing on its route to Hawaii, an analyst told the commander they were currently on a safe path, as Chitose had sent no attackers towards them. When the commander called his vice commander to inform her of the status, he interrupted her creepy moment, pondering how she would look in a swimsuit. At the Zoglian base, Alfred was praised by his military superiors, who commended him for capturing the Chitose base. He was also informed that the capture of the special Valiancers would no longer be under his jurisdiction, but transferred to the Imperial Guards, who were more likely to keep up. While Hina sat in her room thinking about how she was still a suspect, a teammate, Lasha, appeared, asking her to come with her. She dragged Hina to a grass plain, where they looked at deer grazing. Suddenly, they were approached by 2 other Zoglian soldiers who adored the deer as well. However, they looked at it from a feeding perspective, promising to get a rifle and claim their game. Watching her teammates engage in the commotion, Hina began to cheer up, forgetting the lingering problem, Aoba. Back at the Cygnus, Anessa began hosting the promotional video, showing the camera the coupling Valiancers. When she tried to interview the head of maintenance, Don, he rudely responded, claiming his work was better when he wasn't getting bothered by jobless fools. When she interviewed the chef, she got on his nerves, making a dumb remark about him being a talentless cook. They proceeded to video some of the other female workers in their swimsuits, leaving out the vice commander, who threw out her bikini. Meanwhile, at the Zoglian base, Margaret spoke with her superiors, who offered her rewards once she completed the task at hand. In their hangar, they had now received the Imperial Guards, who were ready to go after Cygnus and capture the couplers. Back at Cygnus, Dio and From were scanned to check their compatibility as couplers, but even though they could previously, it was no longer possible as Dio's waves had changed, making it impossible. When the director requested a solution, the team called out to Aoba, who was testing a new mecha. They scanned his compatibility with From and discovered it was a good match, so the crew set up a new plan to involve Aoba in the mix. They were put in their Valiancers, with Aoba taking Luxon and From taking Bradion, while Dio watched from the sidelines, piloting the rickety barrel. Aoba and From coupled, creating a synchrony that was even greater than the first Aoba and Dio connection. However, after putting up a good show, they were suddenly attacked by a barrage of missiles, forcing Dio to come into action as the 3 neutralized all the incoming projectiles. A Cygnus pilot identified multiple charging Valiancers different from the normal, forcing the Valiancers to launch an attack of their own. Dio was annoyed that, due to the useless antics from the promotional crew, He had to face off against the Imperial Guards with a trashy Valiancer. Even though the Valiancers were charged with coupling, the Imperial Guards still forced them back, cornering Aoba and From with multiple attacks. They set multiple air mines out in the sky, making it impossible for the Alliance to dodge and defend each other. After realizing Aoba had been cornered to a trap that lay in the path of a nectar cannon, Dio charged at the Imperial Guards leader, using his trashy barrel to push back the enemy. Upon seeing all their attacks were getting easily outdone by Dio and his useless barrel, the Imperial Guards retreated, planning to rethink their attacking strategy. When the team landed back on the ship, Aoba and From complimented Dio for holding them back with worthless junk as the director came in, commending them for their well-done fight and asking Dio and From for the last scene. The pair were asked to film a shot on the roof, where they promoted the machines and thanked the viewers for watching. Meanwhile, on the Imperial Guard ship, the captain commended his team, telling them they would finish off their mission on the next attack. Back at the Cygnus, Aoba continued to tease Dio on his performance in the promotional video, and when Anessa came in, they were informed that they now had a new pilot in their ranks, From. At a pilot training school in the mountains, students were introduced to the coupling system by their teacher and a special professor. Among the students were Dio and From, with the first focusing on the lectures, while the second couldn't care less about what was going on up front. After the class, From approached Dio while he was eating, asking why he volunteered to join the military. When Dio remembered the trouble he went through regarding his family, he told From his reason was not anyone's business, leaving the table to continue his training. Back to the future, Alfred's Zoglian forces were gifted a new airship, which would make their missions easier. At the Imperial Guard ship, they were informed that Alfred's forces would also be aiming to get the coupling Valiancers, making the leader smile as he enjoyed the idea of competition. Cygnus, on the other hand, received alerts that the enemy ship was trying to scan them, causing the commander to order stealthy progression. They decided to continue their path to Hawaii, using the mountains to hide their signals. At the Imperial ship, an engineer informed the leader to withdraw the ship from the search as a storm was coming, making it nearly impossible for Valiancers to engage in combat. However, the captain opposed, telling his team that it would simply be a waste if they let go of the enemies, with the competition also chasing. At Cygnus, the team prepared to get into their Valiancers, readying themselves for battle as they aimed to race past their opponents. When From talked about their restriction to only 4 members, the pilots were surprised as their lieutenant appeared, claiming he was fit for battle. Elvira came in as well, denying his statement, but he assured them he would be fine, as the doctor gave a green light. The leader of the Imperial Guards ordered his men to launch their front terminal, ignoring the warnings of the engineer who claimed they'd reveal their location. Upon seeing the terminal signal, the Cygnus analysts neutralized it using a wave signal of their own. Elvira called out to Aoba, Dio, and From, telling them she had something important to share. She explained the process of the first-generation coupling, showing the flaws and issues in its design, and showed how her research solved those issues, neutralizing the highlighted problems. She demonstrated how the coupling training program incorporated the studies to ensure compatibility. However, with Aoba, it was different, as he was compatible even without the procedures. Although his readings were perfect, they were a problem for his teammates, as after Dio paired with him multiple times, his readings had reduced. It was the same scenario for From after connecting with Aoba, so the research discovered that Aoba was actually matching the readings of the other pilots. She explained to Dio that if he continued coupling with Aoba, he would be unable to pair with anyone else. However, she was unsure what would happen if they tried to boost him with retraining. While they spoke, the ship reported a new enemy, forcing them to wrap up their discussion and prepare for battle. Alfred's ship had discovered the location of the Cygnus. However, before he could get his soldiers to attack, Margaret barged in, ordering him to give the information to the Imperial Guard. Upon getting the location of the enemy, the Imperial ship charged through the storm, telling Alfred and his people to stay back and desist from attacking their targets. In the meeting room of the pilots, Aoba and Dio chose to pair with each other, while From chose not to do it as he heard the complications of pairing with Aoba. They charged towards the Imperial Guards with full force, ready to get rid of their enemy. While they charged through the dark skies, Aoba noticed the special Valiancer wasn't among the opponents, informing Dio of his discovery. They realized they had been baited into a trap with enemies coming from both sides. The Imperial army attacked their enemies from both sides, setting landmines to limit their movement once again. Although Aoba and Dio had already coupled, they were still under constant pressure from the Imperial army, who had the advantage. Aoba and Dio decided to perform their special combination to get the battle tide back in their favor, hoping to get the smile off the ugly captain's face. They fused to get their low-budget megazord rolling, destroying the enemy Valiancers easily while blocking all attacks. Elvira hypothesized that although Aoba was reducing Dio's numbers, he was increasing his fighting potential, making him a powerful double-edged sword. They charged towards the captain, whose ugly face was no longer smiling, as they split his machine in half, eliminating him in the process. Upon seeing the coupling Valiancers decouple, Alfred decided to take the fattest bone, ordering his Valiancers to charge at the resting enemy. They charged towards the enemy, forcing Cygnus and its Valiancers to retreat from their simultaneous attacks. While the Valiancers retreated, Alfred's forces were also compelled to let it go as the storm was getting thicker, but Hina refused, promising she would defeat the enemy and clear her name. She prevented Luxon from escaping into Cygnus, keeping herself and Aoba at risk. When Aoba tried to force his mecha and hers into the hatch, Hina redirected his path, causing them to hit the airship and crash into the island below. On a mysterious island, Luxon lay bare on the ground, getting beaten by rain under the furious storm. When Aoba woke up, he realized his mecha was non-functional and his location unknown, forcing him to open the cockpit and escape the beaten-down Valiancer. After breaking free from the Valiancer, Aoba walked around the island, hoping to see a chance at escape for him. When he looked down the cliff, he noticed Hina's Valiancer, making him drop down to check on it. When he got to the cockpit, he realized the water had already started to seep into her machine, almost drowning her. He tried to force the hatch open, eventually transitioning to waking her up as it wouldn't budge. However, his time was running out as she remained out like a light with the water now at her face level. At the Zoglian airship, Margaret ordered the soldiers to forget Hina, but rather join the Imperial search party, who would look for their leader after the battle. Alfred looked in disappointment as he considered Margaret a fool, aiming to win the favor of the dead. Meanwhile, on Cygnus, a similar situation took place as the commander ordered they desist from looking for Aoba due to the harsh weather conditions. When Dio left after promising to comply, the commander laughed, knowing Dio would disobey and go after his buddy. Back at the island, Hina regained consciousness with a mysterious face hovering over her head. When she got herself together, she jumped back, realizing it was Aoba, her enemy, who had made her an Imperial suspect. When he tried to explain himself, she beat him down, tying his hands as she swore to return him to the Zoglian Empire to prove her innocence. After getting him tied, she checked her Valiancer and discovered it was dead, with all her emergency supplies washed away. She tried Aoba's as well, but it was in the same condition, only it fortunately had the supply of food she desperately needed. After claiming her loot, she returned him to the cave where she lit up a fire and pointed a gun at him, interrogating him on how he became a pilot and how he knew her. Aoba wondered why the people he was allegedly supposed to meet in the future constantly pointed guns at him. He told her about the past and how she saved him, but she couldn't seem to recall any of those memories. When Aoba called her by her name, she shut him up, telling him not to be familiar, as she had no idea who he was. She warned him that she wasn't his Hina, as she was a full Zoglian citizen, and when Aoba attempted to say any more, she shot a bullet into the roof, hushing him up. Back at Cygnus, Dio walked toward the hangar, ready to disobey the commander's orders. While he walked, he was intercepted by Fromm, who told him the captain gave him 3 hours, and Elvira offered advice that would make his search easier via coupling. At sea, the Zoglian officers continued their search for the Imperial Guard's captain, hoping they wouldn't search the sea till infinity. Back at the island, the storm raged on, pushing Luxon gradually as it fell down some rocks. While Hina and Aoba waited for the rain to let up, Aoba decided to put an end to the silence by continuing his yap. He told the Hina with him about the former one, explaining how she saved him even though they had just spoken. When he was just about gaining her sympathy, they noticed an aggressive sound followed by a violent shake and a landslide which blocked their exit. Their fire had been put out, and they were now trapped together in a cave on an island where nobody knew they were. Struggling to locate each other, Aoba and Hina continued yelling at themselves until eventually, Hina found a torch and illuminated the cave. She decided not to waste time, grabbing a shovel to dig their way out of the rubble that trapped them. When Aoba offered to help, promising not to attempt an escape, she released him from his cuffs, allowing him to grab a log of wood to dig out of the cave. They continued for hours, getting no progress, as the fools dug the bottom layer, obviously meaning more rubble would drop down. Realizing the stupidity in their actions as Aoba continued trying to force through, Hina told him it would be more efficient to dig out the top, so he complied, climbing up to continue his digging. Meanwhile, the Zoglian forces had finally found the Imperial captain, but it was simply his remains from the battle as the Alliance soldiers successfully eliminated him. Knowing their mission was complete, Bazan chose to look for Hina, ignoring the warnings of Margaret, who was eventually convinced to let the team go as they had completed their mission. Dio, on the other hand, continued to use his coupling scanner to look for Aoba, hoping his buddy would at least send an SOS up back at the cave. Their oxygen was already running out, with Hina breaking down to the ground due to fatigue and poor breathing. Aoba decided to dig faster, knowing he could save her as he eventually hit a critical point, bringing down a part of the blockage but allowing a flood into the cave, putting Hina at risk again, while she drowned in the water, thinking about how soon it was for her to die. Hina was saved once again by the majestic hero, Aoba, who took her to shore so she could regain her breathing. He confirmed she was okay before looming around the island for their supplies, which he eventually wrote off as taken by the water. As fortune would have it, Luxon showed signs of life, allowing him to send a message to Cygnus, revealing his location. When the commander asked Elvira how the coupling managed to start up his system, she jokingly called it love, fooling Nasu, who needed Anessa to tell her it was a joke. After confirming his location, Dio asked if Aoba was with the enemy, but rather than answer, he decided to pretend the network was breaking up, cutting off the call in the process. When he got over that, he told Hina to contact her friends as well, which she did, informing them of her location. When Hina asked Aoba why he chose to beep her, he explained that it would be wrong for him to allow them to capture her, as she saved his life before, causing her to laugh at his acts as a terrible soldier. When Dio and From arrived, he offered her the hair clip she once forgot in his possession, telling her he didn't care if she was different. After ensuring she received it, he told her to hide before reuniting with Dio and From, who almost took Luxon while forgetting him. Hina looked at the goofy pilot, Aoba, who claimed to know her, flying away with the team after protecting her and ensuring her safety. She decided she wanted to know more about him, smiling as her own friends came by to pick her up. While the maintenance crew fixed up Luxon, Aoba remembered Hina from the island, claiming she didn't know him, making him give up on any hope to get back to his home. The next day, Cygnus received a call from one of the higher-ups, a vice admiral, who asked why they hadn't gotten to the Hawaii base as ordered. The commander responded, telling him that they had faced Zoglian interruptions along the way, but were currently en route to Hawaii. After hearing the report, the vice admiral commended them for their work, also informing them that they would be involved in the next large-scale mission. However, he was cut short by a mysterious individual who hacked into the call and disconnected him. The man was none other than Elvira's teacher, Professor Fermi. He had come with a ship to board the Cygnus, as he was eager to meet the coupling machines and their pilots. He was welcomed on board by the vice commander and Elvira, whom he teased for getting old with a wrinkly face. Some minutes later, they met up with Aoba and Dio, who they requested to couple since Dr. Fermi was eager to see. While preparing to couple, Aoba asked if the professor was the one responsible for creating coupling. Nasu denied it and explained that although he created the foundational principles, it was only possible due to Elvira's cockpits, which allowed them to successfully couple. The professor butted in, claiming Elvira simply stole his thunder by renovating his plans. He proceeded to commend Elvira for becoming a better researcher than him. Before long, the pilots successfully coupled, showing the professor their numbers before decoupling after the time limit came to an end. After changing from the pilot suit, Aoba tried to leave the dressing room but was blocked by Dio, who claimed he wasn't going to be fooled by an idiot. He told Aoba he knew he was on the island with his Hina. However, Aoba told him it was irrelevant, given that Hina was different from the maiden who saved him. When Dio called his time travel story a dumb lie, Aoba responded, saying he didn't care if he was believed or not. Upon seeing Aoba was uninterested in his provocations, Dio took it further, punching him to the ground. They began to throw punches at each other, with Aoba not wanting to lose to a Siscon, while Dio was against a lovesick moron. After getting separated, they were detained and forced to stay in cells side by side. While in detention, the boys were approached by the professor, who wanted to know more about Aoba's time travel story. The professor explained the process of coupling, describing it as a similar scenario to time traveling using the pilot's minds. When Aoba asked for the relevance of all the yapping, Dio broke it down that the professor believed he was a delusional fool. After getting his message across, the professor smiled before leaving the pilots in their cells. He headed over to a meeting with the commander and vice of the Cygnus. After sipping a cup of tea, he warned them that they must be careful, as there was a particular student of his, Han, who defected to the Zoglian Empire, making it possible that they already understood coupling but simply needed Elvira's cockpit. Meanwhile, on the Zoglian ship, the Han in question held a meeting with Alfred and Margaret, telling them about the limitation of coupling. He warned Margaret not to disappoint him, as he was unsure what the Intelligence Bureau would do if they shamelessly lost once again. Before long, Alfred prepped his soldiers, telling them the important things they needed to know before heading into the battle. Margaret appeared in a pilot suit, informing the officers that she would lead the battlefield for that attack. In a waiting room on the ship, Hina was haunted by her memories of Aoba, absently holding the hair clip he had given her, as Bizon entered the room. He looked agitated and asked her how she was able to contact him on the island, even though her Valiancer was dead. She explained that she found the enemy ship alone in the forest, but she couldn't claim it as he arrived with reinforcements. Bizon told her that no one else would believe such a convenient story. However, he did, so she needed to tell him details like that if she wanted him to protect her. Just then, Alfred appeared, telling Bizon to get into his mecha and prepare to attack. At Cygnus, Lee opened up the prison, releasing the pilots who were still angry at each other ahead of their battle with the Zoglian forces. Although they were not on good terms, they successfully managed to couple, giving them their edge in battle. They were suddenly under attack from an almost uncountable amount of missiles threatening to scourge their ship. While Aoba defended against them, he was charged at by Bizon, who wanted to get revenge for Hina. Although the Alliance Nectar shields were up, some of their attacks managed to get through to the carrier ship, striking Dr. Fermi in the process. He assured them he was fine and told Elvira the future was in her hands as a next-generation researcher. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, Aoba and Dio continued to be overwhelmed by the sheer number of missiles the Zoglians fired. Realizing it was all a trap to keep them busy until their coupling time ran out, Dio cooked up a pep talk, motivating Aoba to steel his will in an effort to defeat the excessive projectiles. They channeled their frustrations into the coupling, eliminating as many projectiles as they could. However, time was running against them, as they had 10 seconds left of coupling power. To the surprise of the team, who were worried about what they would do without coupling, Aoba and Dio continued to fight through using coupling, even though the timer had already gone up. They eliminated all the missiles, exceeding 400 seconds of coupling time, as Dio attacked Margaret's machine, slicing off her arms and putting her at risk of explosion. Just before she crashed into a sea with her Valiancer, which refused to eject, she was caught by Alfred, who advised the team to retreat as they had been beaten. Elvira and Nasu watched in amazement as Dio and Aoba broke the coupling limitation, amazing the professor. However, he was struck by a missile in a carrier ship where he was alone, causing him to fall down and pass on. When the Alliance got down to Hawaii, they packed up his body as Elvira mourned the loss of her great teacher. Meanwhile, at the Zoglian base, Han decided to offer Margaret temporary leave due to her incompetence, and told Lieutenant Colonel Alfred that he would be expecting new reinforcements to ensure their capture of a coupling cockpit. When the reinforcements arrived, Hina was surprised as she was now paired with her Zoglian pilot hero, Ryuzan, her dad. After the death of Professor Fermi, the soldiers honored his dedication and work with a burial. His influence was so consequential, it attracted the attention of Weinberg, Dio's father. The next day, Dio, Aoba, and Nasu were granted permission by the commander to go out on a tour of Hawaii. Elvira handed over a list to Nasu, asking her to get the items on it along the way. When Elvira asked if it would be an issue, Nasu objected, pulling out Anessa's abnormally long list, which she accepted as proof she was committed to going shopping. Later that day, Aoba and Dio waited in the car for Nasu, who took the usual female route of wasting time before getting out. After a while, she arrived in clothes differing from her normal military outfit. When she asked if her dressing was too casual, Aoba told her she looked okay, asking Dio, who agreed he was correct. Before long, they set out on their journey across Hawaii. At the military base, the commander and his vice held a meeting with their superior. They were informed that coupling would soon be accepted by the people, and a simulation operation would soon be held to fire up the soldiers. At the cafe, Anessa wondered why she didn't simply follow the pilot shopping. But when From appeared at her table, she forgot all her concerns and moved to his side, ready to leech him like a female vampire. Back at the vehicle, Dio and Aoba had continued their regular bickering. Aoba tried to convince Dio to meet with his father, but Dio was totally against it, calling his father a blockhead with no understanding ability. When Aoba offered to go speak on his behalf, Dio told him it was as pointless as adding salt to the sea. After giving Dio more options on settling his daddy issues, Aoba realized the son was just as hard-headed as the father, causing an argument. After getting to a stop, Dio alighted from the vehicle, not wanting to put up with Aoba's unnecessary talking. Rather than wait to convince Dio to return, Aoba told Nasu it would be a waste of time to try convincing him, so he started the car and left the stop. While Dio walked down the road thinking about his family issues, he was approached by his family butler who invited him into a hotel. Aoba and Nasu, on the other hand, continued driving on their way, with Nasu feeling bad for Dio, who was forced to leave the car. Aoba decided to use his regular yapping tactic to start a conversation, telling her about his dad, who was a firefighter. Although his dad was their hero and a helper to all, he died untimely, leaving Aoba with the mentality that he had to protect his family in his father's place. He joined the basketball team in school, lifting the burden off his mind for a while, but now he had been transported to the future, where the family he desperately wanted to protect was no longer around. At base, the commander asked for information on Han from Elvira, which she gave, describing him as a mad scientist. Simultaneously, Han was also being asked about Elvira, whom he described as a good scientist but ultimately inferior to him. In the Zoglian ship, Ryuzan, Hina's dad, spoke with Alfred, commending him for keeping Hina on her toes. Meanwhile, his partner prepped Alfred's soldiers on their mission to steal an enemy Valiancer. When Hina asked if attacking the Hawaii base would be possible, he told her they could do it if they snuck in. After getting the mission passed, some of Ryuzan's men decided to have fun teasing Hina about being a child. However, when the jokes became too strong, Ryuzan appeared, glaring at the unlucky soldier who was caught in the act. Ryuzan passed new instructions to his men, telling Hina she would be an important part of his plan since she had first-hand experience with the coupling machines. When Bizon heard the plan, he offered to team up with Hina, which Ryuzan accepted. Back in Hawaii, Aoba and Nasu saw Fiona along the way and decided to give her a ride around town. She asked if Dio was doing fine, so not wanting his sister to know they were involved in an argument, Nasu simply replied yes. She thanked them for being good friends with Dio, looking around the landscape as they moved. She had argued with her father about Dio at a restaurant, so she left, hoping to get her mind off things. When Aoba heard her father was still being stubborn, he declared that he would challenge the old man, forcing Fiona to stop him as it would be a waste of time. Nasu decided to change the mood, telling Fiona to join them as they went shopping. However, Fiona would only make the mood tense for her, as she assumed Aoba and Nasu were on a date, making Nasu blush as Aoba denied it. At the Weinberg Hotel, Dio was escorted into the dining room where he would see his father and have a discussion. Some years back, Ryuzan moved Hina to a new environment where she met Bizon, her new neighbor. She trained with her father, played with Bizon, and made multiple new types of memory, solidifying her identity as a Zoglian. Back to the present, Bizon talked about his history with Hina, causing her to feel a bit down as there was an issue on her mind from the past. Just then, some soldiers brought in some wine bottles and glasses, pouring for every soldier, including Hina, as they toasted to their new operation. At the Weinberg Hotel, Dio and his father ate in silence, not speaking to each other. When he had enough of the tense air, his father broke the ice, thanking Dio for protecting them back at Chitos. They continued to talk along the lines of Dio's work, eventually reaching the topic of Dr. Fermi, who was a close friend of Weinberg and an advisor to him. He had heard Dio got a new buddy with the name of Aoba, but was disappointed that Dio was dumb enough to continue pairing with the boy even though it was reducing the possibility of pairing with other people. He stood up and walked to the window, asking Dio what he would do if Aoba died, leaving him with no coupling buddy and poor compatibility. Dio claimed Aoba would never die and, in the worst-case scenario, he would simply be retrained. When his dad asked him to leave the army, Dio argued against it, telling him he knew Aoba was a useless, lovesick, sappy hack of a partner, but the fool would not be so careless as to die in battle. He stood up and thanked his father for caring, leaving his father in surprise as he left. The man decided to leave Dio with a thought of his own, saying he had matured and become a better person. Later that evening, Aoba and Nasu took Fiona to her destination, the hotel where Dio had dropped off. When she asked if Dio was with them, Nasu apologized for keeping it a secret that Dio had left. Dio came out of the hotel asking why Fiona was with the stupid Aoba. She narrated their shopping adventure, thanking Aoba and Nasu for taking care of her. When she asked what Dio was doing in the hotel, he admitted he had finally had a discussion with their father, making Fiona happy. Minutes passed by, and Dio was left with Fiona to do the catching up they were robbed of at Chitos. While looking at Aoba enjoying the discussions of siblings, Nasu asked Aoba if he wanted to go back to his time, which he wasn't sure of. Just then, Dio appeared with Fiona, thanking Nasu for taking care of her. He advised Fiona not to stay close to Aoba, as he could contract stupidity just by being near him. They argued for a while before eventually retiring for the night after their day of fun. The next day, the base began their coupling simulation, showing the superiors all they had discovered over time. After completing their demonstration, Aoba and Dio continued their unnecessary bickering, leaving Nasu, who had rushed towards them, fed up. Later that night, the Zoglian Empire began their mission to hijack the Valiancer cockpits, sneaking into Hawaii with their Alliance disguises. At the Hawaii base, a private ship requested help due to its left engine catching fire, causing the base to send out its firefighters in response. While they dealt with the fire, multiple Zoglian soldiers in disguises snuck through their borders, including Ryuzan and his team. Suddenly, the airport was ridden with multiple explosions, giving the workers more to do. A set of Zoglian Valiancers dropped down as well, wreaking havoc in the airport. With their distraction doing its job, the Ryuzan squad successfully infiltrated Hawaii, giving them access to the base. They changed back to their Zoglian gear and infiltrated the base hangar, informing their Valiancers they could go airborne. The Alliance commander analyzed the issue, wondering what the enemy's goal was, as they weren't attacking strongly and were getting held back by workers with bullets. He instructed the analysts to return to the command center and the pilots to gear up so they could defend the maintenance building that was infiltrated. However, the Zoglian army had already made its way to the coupling Valiancers, eliminating all the guards in their way. Bison and a teammate entered their cockpits and began hacking the machines for their use. While the soldiers on the ground watched the men in action, one of the maintenance workers who was shot attempted to eliminate Hina, forcing Ryuzan to take the bullet in her defense. Before the team could tend to their wounded captain, Alliance soldiers barged in, shooting down their soldiers and limiting their actions. They took Ryuzan to a special room, leaving him with Hina to attend to his injuries while they found an escape route. When Hina prepared to treat him, he stopped her, telling her there was something important she needed to know. While Aoba and his teammates attempted to get into the hangar, he was separated from the rest by a falling Valiancer, which blocked his path. Back in the hidden room, Ryuzan confessed he wasn't Hina's father. He had found her alone in the aftermath of a war with no memories but her name, so he took her in, ready to become a fatherly figure. After telling her the truth of her background, he told her to leave before the enemy found them and killed them both. While he thought about his daughter who had just left, some of the Alliance soldiers found him and decided to put him out of his misery. However, he decided to go out with a big bang, exploding the entire room with a grenade. After hearing the grenade, Hina mourned, remembering the last words of her father. But rather than remembering her memories with him, she remembered the words of Aoba, who claimed he knew her. When she opened her eyes, she saw the Aoba in question standing in front of her, wondering what was wrong. He asked her what was going on. However, she ignored his question, telling him she wasn't who she thought she was, causing Aoba to approach the girl suffering an identity crisis. In the hangar, Bison realized Hina had not come back, so he asked his partner to cover for him before jumping out of the Valiancer to go find her. Back at the vending machine, Hina told Aoba she was likely his Hina, as she had no knowledge of her past. Taking the opportunity to win back his love, Aoba offered her a chance at the Cygnus, stretching out his hand with the offer to join him. However, before Hina could accept, Bison appeared, pointing a gun at Aoba, telling him to stop. He told her to step away from the enemy, but she didn't, making him remember that it was the soldier from before who claimed he knew her name. He asked Hina if she was a traitor who would betray her dead father. But Hina didn't respond, not knowing what to say. Bison charged in and dragged back Hina, pointing his gun toward Aoba. But he was stopped as Dio shot his gun, pushing him back. The Zoglian soldiers retreated, leading to a crossfire, which the foolish Aoba didn't seem to notice, thinking about Hina. Bison grabbed Hina and ran back toward the hangar, hoping for an escape. Meanwhile, outside the building, the Alliance had released multiple Valiancers in the Cygnus, pushing the enemy back. They eliminated all the enemy missiles and pushed back their forces, eventually welcoming Luxon and Bradian to the battle as well. However, they were put in utter shock as Dio and Aoba reported the Valiancers had been stolen, with Zoglian pilots riding their mechas. The commander ordered the machines to be shot down, but Aoba was against it, claiming Hina was inside, causing a fight with Dio. The pair decided to take other Valiancers with first-generation coupling mechanics. Although Elvira warned them against it, they used the machines to couple, triggering the cringe transformation. They chased after the stolen Valiancers, leaving Elvira in surprise that they could successfully pull it off. After successfully catching up to the opponent, Aoba tried to talk sense into Hina, forcing Bison to charge after him in anger for speaking with Hina. When Dio and Aoba angrily attacked Bison in the Valiancer, their first-generation cockpits created a reaction that let both of them witness each other's memories but ended the coupling process. Bison was free and the Valiancers were successfully stolen, leaving Aoba and Dio trying to grasp their breath as the coupling process had passed special information on Aoba into Dio. After losing the Valiancers and the incident with the old generation machines, Elvira examined Dio and Aoba in the coupling testing machines, confirming they were okay. She complained that she was tired of dumb pilots not listening to her instructions, and explained to the boys that the machines were programmed not to allow coupling, so they forced through and overrode the commands. After completing the tests, Dio approached Aoba, accepting he was indeed a time traveler. At the Zoglian base, they held a funeral for all the dead soldiers during the invasion. After completing the ceremony, Bison called out Hina to a tree, asking her about the relationship she had with Aoba. He accused her of being a possible betrayer and protecting the enemy, but she denied it, telling him she only met him for the first time at her first battle with Alfred's team. She told him about how Ryuzan wasn't her father, confusing Bison more. She also told him the stories Aoba described, claiming she was from the past, and Bison laughed it off, calling it horse poop. She tried to make it sensible, asking Bison why Aoba knew her name and gave her a hair clip, but he refused to listen to the story, slapping away the hair clip from her hand in anger. He ordered her to listen to his orders, telling her he was the only one who cared about her in the world. When he kissed her to pass across his message, she pushed him back, saying his mouth stank, causing him to leave the cemetery in shame. After he left, she picked up her alleged hair clip and thought about the recent events. Later that day, Han tested out the new cockpits, checking the coupling ability of Hina and Bison. He confirmed that Hina was highly compatible with the system, but called Bison utter garbage, who could do nothing with a coupling machine. After completing the test, he called Hina to his office, asking her to become their first coupling pilot. When she told him she'd think about it, he offered her an injection that would calm down her brainwaves. Back at Cygnus, the team had a meeting as Dio claimed to have seen Aoba's memories. Elvira stated it was possible, given the first-generation couplers had issues over connecting the pilots. When the commander asked what Dio saw, he confessed that Aoba was indeed a time traveler and had history with Hina before entering a low-budget black hole. Although the team was still skeptical about whether or not to believe them, Nasu convinced them that it was of no importance as Aoba was still the same mysterious Aoba. Back at the Zoglian base, Han told Alfred he would be taking control of Hina, as she had volunteered to become the first Zoglian coupler. When Bison confronted her on her decision, Hina spoke like a brain-dead zombie, uttering the same words over and over again. After Han came in, Bison asked how he could become Hina's partner. The professor responded, explaining that he was comparable to a dead fish in coupling ability, but if he was ready to go through some horrendous procedures, he would become her coupling partner. Before long, the professor commenced his project, pushing Bison to the limit in a freaky gizmo. At the Hawaii base, Cygnus launched out along with other important airships and carrier planes. They were commencing an operation under the vice admirals, where they would get back their couplers and defeat the Zoglian army. They would be attacking the Zoglian Alaskan base, which had just built itself a massive Nectar cannon. Although the project was not supposed to be complete, the Zoglians managed a way to get it done, forcing the Alliance to take action against the massive threat. At the ship hangar, Dio approached Aoba, telling him Fiona sent her regards. He confirmed Aoba's will to save Hina and told Aoba he would be behind him, given he had someone he wanted to protect of his own. At the Zoglian Alaskan base, the head of cannon control was given a plan by Margaret, asking him to follow it when they go into battle. She reported to Alfred, telling him that the base had accepted his plan. At another sector of the base, Bison approached Hina, telling her he would become the perfect coupling partner for her. He hugged the mindless zombie, who continued repeating her monotonous words. On the day of the attack, the Alaskan base readied its super cannon to fire. Cygnus and the other Alliance ships approached from the other side, ready to commence battle. Anessa confirmed that the new coupling mecha made for Dio and Aoba was already getting transported to them, so the vice commander ordered the Cygnus pilots to charge full speed ahead. However, their plan wouldn't go hitch-free as an analyst reported the massive cannon named Gorgon was aiming to fire. Although there were mountains blocking the shot path, Margaret ordered the captain to fire, launching a Nectar attack that split through its obstacles, charging towards the Alliance fleet. When the force saw the attack, the vice commander instructed all ships to dodge to the left, but it was too late, as 51% of the fleet was already down. The Zoglian forces launched an attack of their own, downing the leftover members of the Alliance fleet. When Alfred saw two machines going out of formation, he ordered them to come back, but to his surprise, it was Bison and Hina, who had now become independent soldiers under the Intelligence Bureau. Using her newly developed Valiancer, Hina destroyed multiple Alliance machines without losing her cool. Back at the Cygnus, Lee requested the commanders give him a go, but they refused, explaining they were analyzing the situation. The aces, Aoba and Dio, would be unable to join the battle as the transport ship carrying their new couplers was nowhere to be found after the Gorgon attack. At the Alliance military headquarters, the Vice Admiral ordered the remaining soldiers on the battlefield to eliminate Gorgon, forcing Cygnus to release its Valiancers along with its special couplers, who would use the first-generation machines to get the transport ship holding theirs. The pilots flew out, going to their respective destinations, hoping to turn the tide of the fight. While Alfred continued to defeat his enemies, he was informed that the captain of the Alaskan base had gotten too greedy and would be launching another attack in 15 minutes. He regretted his decision of convincing the fool to use the machine and told his squad to continue their attack while being mindful of the 15 minutes. At another part of the battlefield, Hina began to feel the effects of the brainwashing, making her twitch in agony. The commander of Cygnus had finally understood the battle, releasing the other Valiancers and changing the tide of the battle to their favor. Upon seeing this change, Alfred decided to charge in, but he was put at ease by Bison, who offered to chase after the enemies since he could couple. He attempted to proceed with the process with Hina, but after remembering the events with Ryuzan, Hina was reluctant, pausing the process. After noticing her stubbornness, Han decided to use a special trick up his sleeve, telling Bison to attempt it again. When he initiated the process, Hina was forced into coupling, leaving her in agony as her machine converted into full power. They used their mighty machines to get rid of the low-level Valiancers around the Cygnus, causing the command center to panic as they were up against coupling machines. The other Zoglian soldiers looked in amazement as the two Valiancers cleared a path for them to attack. After seeing the Cygnus, Bison laughed as he would finally be able to get rid of Aoba. When he charged in to attack the ship, he was blocked by Lee and the others, but they were no issue to him as his machine was far superior. They successfully landed attacks on the Cygnus, putting the team in a pickle, but before Bison could fire a dangerous attack, a fire beam dropped from the sky, pushing him back. Aoba and Dio had returned with the new Luxon and Bradyon, pushing the opponents back and giving Cygnus a breath of relief. They proceeded to couple, showing off a new, better version of their previous Valiancers. Upon seeing the new machines, Hina and Bison launched attacks of their own, creating a battle of couplers that none of the others could keep up with. Not wanting to waste any time, Cygnus and the other Alliance ships launched their attacks, pushing the Zoglian forces back and swaying the battle tide to their favor. After analyzing the information from the couplers battle, Elvira noticed a flaw in the Zoglian forces. She explained to Dio and Aoba that the enemy coupling was forced, and due to that window, they had a chance at victory. She told them of a plan that would grant them victory, so knowing it was their best shot, Dio and Aoba commenced it. They flew up to the sky and initiated a decoupling, powering down their super ability. When Hina charged towards him to attack his machine, Aoba blocked the attack, reminding her that it was him, Aoba, the guy who had continuously stalked her since she first met him in battle. When she listened to his Yap no Jutsu, it worked, releasing her from the brainwashing as she recognized Aoba and called out to him. The change forced a decoupling, knocking out Hina and pushing back Bison, allowing Aoba to grab her mecha and evacuate the area with Dio. While they charged away, Bison regained himself, charging towards Aoba with rage for stealing his Hina. The Alliance forces were informed that the Gorgon was preparing to fire another shot, so they needed to clear out of the way. When Margaret warned the captain not to fire another shot due to the presence of their soldiers, he refused, claiming he had informed everyone. However, he was immediately informed of a bug in their plan, as 3 Valiancers were currently en route to them. When Hina woke up, she told Aoba she had refused the coupling offer from Dr. Han, and Elvira responded, telling her Han was a maniac who would get what he wanted by force. As they continued on their path, Bison caught up, kicking Luxon away before grabbing Hina and asking her to couple. When she tried to refuse, Han set another forced coupling, creating stress patterns on her brain, which caused her to scream in agony. Although Hina continued to resist the forced coupling, Bison kept screaming like a psychopath, trying to force the coupling. After seeing Hina was in peril, Aoba initiated a pairing of his own towards Hina, which she calmly accepted, destroying Han's connection. The process initiated as Aoba was allowed into Hina's mindscape, freeing her of her shackles and allowing her to escape the clutches of Bison. They created a coupling far superior to any other scene, forcing Bison to scream in agony as he had just witnessed his own NTR. Upon seeing the majestic light, the Alaskan captain ordered his men to fire Gorgon, hoping it would defeat the enemy. The attack was deflected by the sheer force of Hina and Aoba's coupling, which pushed back the attack and created a weird phenomenon. A Walmart black hole was formed, and Bison, who had lost his power, was sucked into the anomaly. Aoba recognized the hole as the phenomenon that brought him into the future. When Hina heard Bison's chant to get rid of Aoba, she remembered it was her destiny to save Aoba by following him in and defeating Bison before he eliminated Aoba. She charged into the hole as Aoba was blocked from saving her by Dio, who watched her sacrifice herself for her buddy. She appeared in the past and readied herself for her mission to defeat Bison when the time came through. Aoba realized it was simply a time loop where Hina would save him, get reborn without her memories, and continue along that path infinitely. So, in another timeline, he charged up with Dio's support and prevented her from going any further. When she asked who was going to prevent him from dying in the past, Aoba and Dio fired nectar blasts, eliminating Bison and his Valiancer in the anomaly. They escaped the hole, creating a clear sky as the Alliance forces charged through and destroyed the Alaskan forces, including Gorgon, forcing the Zoglian army to retreat. The heroes confirmed their safety and headed back to the Cygnus, taking Hina along. When she asked why he stopped her from going, he explained that it was simply an impulsive thought, which Dio described as his retardation. He chose not to go to the past because he believed more chances would come, and he didn't want to leave the Siscon Dio hanging. The base loomed in the distance as they stumbled back, victory in their hands. But the cost of the battle weighed heavily on their shoulders. At another part of the Zoglian Empire, some high-ranking officials held a meeting with a familiar antagonist face. The maniacal lover Dio had bided his time for over 70 years, ready to get his revenge at last on Watase Aoba. If you've gotten to this point of the video, let's confuse the fake fans by commenting Sigma Monkey. Is it just me, or were we kept in suspense on the topic of Dio's mum? Also, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. See you guys next time.